All right, hello everybody. I think we're up to our fifth episode
Yeah, I think
now,
so. Fourth or fifth.
and thank you everybody. Apparently, we've had almost 20,000 people have been interested in hearing Corey and I's nonsense, which is pretty cool. I mean, when we originally started this, we thought it would just be our wives listening to this and maybe forcing our kids every now and then. But it's been great. And today we have some really exciting news.
Hot off the
Hot
presses.
off the presses. Yeah, about 10 was about.
Last week, I
Yeah,
think.
was it last week or it was May 14th. So about almost 2 weeks
Hmm.
ago, the Supreme Court of the United States decided a case called Montgomery. And the basic premise of the case was whether there was going to be something called F quad A preemption against a broker for a negligent selection claim of a motor carrier. And these cases have been hotly contested for the last, for the better part of the last 10 years, I would
Yeah.
say. And there have been a split in authorities, in the circuits throughout the country. Some said you could, some said you couldn't. And so, the Supreme Court, in what was really kind of surprising, it was a unanimous decision, 9-0, saying that while there was preemption, the safety exception for under the F quad A preemption applies. And what that allows states to do is regulate safety. And so, the term with respect to a motor vehicle obviously applied to a tractor trailer, and brokers are in that business. So it's caused shockwaves throughout, really throughout the industry. This case was against C.H. Robinson, but there's some real practical effects of this decision. It now is going to force brokers to vet carriers and look at the safety of these particular carriers. One of the things, Corey, we were talking about it, the fact that so many carriers are not rated, and
Yep.
tell them like why that what that means, and then why in this context that becomes so important.
Yeah, so this is exactly whoever listened to our last episode about the chameleon
Yeah.
carriers, right? This kind of parlays right into that, right? These trucking companies are opening, and they're not getting a safety rating because the DOT just doesn't have enough
Yep.
manpower, right? So,
And they're called a new entrant.
right,
Yeah.
they're new entrants to the market. They don't have a safety rating, and essentially what these brokers are doing are getting these new entrants into the market to carry loads for them for a shipper at a cheaper
Yeah.
rate, and then the broker gets paid more money because of that,
Yeah,
right?
no
I mean, that's
question.
exactly what's happening here.
And so you have 80% of the trucking industry right now, these carriers have no rating, right? So they have no safety rating. And so what the brokers were saying was, well, geez, all they have to do is not have a rating that's unconditional. Well, that's just not even practical anymore, because you have 80% of the trucks out there that are on the roadway, these companies, they have no rating whatsoever. And that's common in the industry. The industry they know that, right? And so, they were relying upon this fact and saying, well, geez, if you're not unconditional, then we could use you. But you got to dig a little further. Like, you got to look at it and say, well, Jace, all right, you may not have a rating, but you've had a ton of violations in the last year, right? And
Right.
so if you've had a ton of violations in the last year, they know for certain that these are the types of carriers that are more likely to cause a crash than ones that don't have violations, right? And so now, on the backdrop of Montgomery, it's going to require brokers to do a little bit more than just say, do you have a license? Do you have insurance? That's it. I mean, and that was always the argument that we would hear, like, well, hey, we're not we don't have to do anything other than find out that they have a license and an insurance. We're not the regulators, et cetera, et cetera. And really, this opinion was very clear. Like, you you have an obligation to use reasonable care. If you're a broker, use reasonable care in selecting a motor carrier. And these claims fall under the restatement 411 of torts and negligent selection of a contractor. And so now, now they gotta be reasonable.
Well, and I was just looking up through the decision because they talked some numbers here, and I
Yeah.
thought the numbers were staggering. Like this isn't something that like this is something that happens all the time, right?
Every day.
There's 28,000 brokers that arrange for about 1/3 of all freight that's shipped in the United States. There's 780 carriers. So I mean,
Yeah.
that is a ton of freight that these brokers are shipping,
Yeah.
or getting carriers to ship on
Yep.
arranging the transportation, and to just essentially hide your head in the sand is not
Well,
feasible anymore.
Yeah,
They
I mean,
can't do it anymore.
especially, here was the danger, and fortunately, the Supreme Court got this, they got this right, because you had a couple of different players that were, really pushing for this F quad A preemption. One of them was Amazon, right? So Amazon was saying, they filed an amicus brief on this. They're a shipper. They're not a broker. And they were saying that, hey, so what? F quad A should be applied to us. Now here's the danger for that. Amazon has more trailers than any other company out there. They own the trailers or lease the trailers. So if F quad A applied to the Amazons of the world that own all these trailers and they're a shipper, then they would have absolutely no responsibility to do maintenance on the trailers whatsoever. None. It would essentially eliminate or gut all of the rules in the federal motor carrier safety regulations regarding pre-trip inspections, maintenance, et cetera. And this is something that Amazon was pushing, right? That's dangerous. I mean, that's really dangerous. If you give a company like that is this massive company, and say, well, geez, you don't have to do any maintenance. What do you think they're going to do? You think they're going to do maintenance, or they're just going to roll the dice? What safety incentive do they have? None. Zero.
Yep.
Absolutely zero. And then the other real dangerous part of this was, the C.H. Robinsons of the world and the TQLs of the world, it allowed them to use non-domiciled, meaning non-American companies,
Yeah.
and we have a case right now involving them on it, non-domiciled companies that nobody has to have a CDL from a state in the United States. They didn't have to pass any tests in the United States. They, didn't even have to read or write English, which is a requirement under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. What they were pushing was, even if we use those types of carriers and they cause a crash, it's not our responsibility. It's the federal government's responsibility to go and police them and take them off the road before a crash happens. That's crazy, right? These brokers are the C.H. Robinsons and the TQLs of the world and the Echo Globals and the RXOs, they are so sophisticated. They have algorithms that they can, in databases that they could tap into to see the health of a carrier in real time, right? They have cab reports. They have access to systems called Carrier 411. Carrier 411 is fantastic. It will literally tell you the health and safety of a carrier today, right now.
In real time, right?
In real time. Yeah. And then the other thing that is really interesting is, and we could never really understand it about, so there's a crash indicator on the safety scores, but it's not visible to the public. But if a broker asks a carrier for their PIN number, they could go in and see what it is. And they just never would. And why wouldn't you want to, take
they
5 seconds and say, let me see your indicator.
Well, they didn't need to know. Because it didn't matter to them, right? They were just trying to get paid as much money as possible, and they were going to have any repercussions on the back end for it.
No repercussions at all.
Right? I mean, it really depended, I guess, on where you were in the country at the time, right? Because there was a huge split in the country of whether a broker could be held liable for this. And that's why this decision was so important, because
Yeah.
Depending on what state you were in, what
Well,
court, you may not have been
and not
for your
only
case.
it not only is important for victims, but it was also important for the freight industry as well, because you had a large portion of brokers that were doing this, right?
Yeah.
So why would it be fair for you have 28,000 brokers? Why, if you're talking about leveling a playing field, why is it fair that some of them are doing what should be done, looking at the health and safety of these carriers before they give them
Yeah.
loads, and then you have a whole swath of other ones that are like, hey, the
That's a
heck with
great
it.
point, actually.
The heck with it. So it really leveled the playing field, and now they talk about, oh my gosh, the floodgates of litigation. That's nonsense. And here's the reason being: as long as the broker is acting in a reasonable fashion, meaning they're looking at the basic scores, which are public and take 5 minutes. They're looking at the violation history. Again, 10 minute. We could go and look at the violation history of a motor carrier right now, and
Anyone can.
anyone can.
Go on
Anyone can.
on the Safer website.
Yeah, you can go on the Safer website. And I was reading an article last week. Now some of these very sophisticated brokers are using AI. So they build AI programs to go in and scrub this data like that. I mean, literally within seconds, they could say, okay, this particular broker, go in, tell us the violation history, and then they could contact that broker and say, give us your ID, right?
Yeah.
And here's why that becomes so important in the context of this case. What was it, Corey? Probably 4 or 5 years ago, the American Trucking Research Institute came out with their last statistics,
I
like
think
where
about
they
5
they
years ago,
looked
yeah.
at tons of data, and they determined that if drivers have a previous crash, companies have a previous crash, maintenance problem, all these things. What they did is they ran a model, and they said, well, if on these statistics, if somebody has a crash or speeding or reckless driving, they are X percentage more likely to be involved in a crash than somebody that doesn't. So now they know that there are problem drivers, problem companies out there, and that if you hire one of those, there's 60-70% chance, 60-70% increase in the potential to cause a crash. So why would you go and hire them?
Right.
Why wouldn't you just hire one that doesn't have that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it parlays, like I said, into our last topic, the chameleon carriers,
Yeah.
right? Because those carriers are causing crashes and then opening up a new shop, and no safety rating, new entrants, and these brokers are just allowing them to
Yeah.
drive for them. So hopefully, this decision will also cut down on the chameleon carriers.
You hope, and just to kind of refresh everybody, the chameleon carriers are the ones that they're in business one day, they cause a crash, out of business, same company, same trucks. I mean, they are literally just taking the like duct tape and putting it over, and writing, I mean, it's
Changing the number.
Yeah, changing the numbers. So one of the things that this will also hope to do is prevent brokers from using chameleon carriers, because all they got to do is pay $300 and they get a license, right? Insurance and a license.
This decision can only help the carriers who are doing business the right way, too.
No question about it.
Right.
And I think it really spoke volumes that there were trucking organizations that wanted this, and obviously the brokers really fought very hard, fought very hard against it. But you also, I mean, interesting coalition. I think it was 28 states. The Solicitor Generals all signed on to the plaintiff saying, no, we should have the right to be able to, police our roadways and make our roadways safer. I mean, you had, the Solicitor General from I think it was like Arkansas and California. I mean, they wouldn't agree on anything ever.
Yeah.
And they're agreeing on this particular issue, or Alabama or whatever it was. But you had red and blue states. So it was something that was truly did cross over, bipartisan lines. The other interesting thing is, Justice Kavanaugh did a concurring opinion, and he talked about the fact that this is going to have a pretty dramatic effect on the brokerage industry, and it is and it should. And the reason I say that is, the brokerage industry was, really largely not regulated, not policed.
It's pretty much unregulated.
I mean, the only thing that was stopping brokers was whenever there was a crash, you were bringing a case against the brokers. And so now, now the brokers have to take a step back and they have to say, all right, how do we do this? What are the policies and procedures to do this the safest way? And that's not a bad thing.
No, it's you wish you were doing that from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing. I mean, like I said, it's if you have a choice between hiring, should you hire a company where they have no English speaking drivers, no drivers that have an American, a CDL, and have a history of crashes? Should you hire that company? Or should you hire the company that has a satisfactory safety rating? They've been in business 10 years. They've had little to no, problems over that 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, why wouldn't you want to hire that company? And, it's just intuitively like, you're like, well, yeah.
It came down to money, right?
Yeah, it came down to money because obviously that company was more expensive.
Correct. But like I said, this should help the mom and pop shops in the U.S. that are actually doing this stuff.
No question about it. No, yeah. I mean, you got the brokerage firms now. The mom and pop carriers are the carriers that are running their railroad the right way. The carriers that are investing in safety. They got a dedicated safety program. They're doing the things that should be done.
They're following the rules.
They're following. they're following the rules. Those are the ones that are going to rise to the top, for this, and they should, as opposed to, if this would have gone the other way, you would have seen a race to the bottom, because now, if this didn't go the way that it should, you would have there would have been no backstop at all. So I think that there's some very practical reasons, for this particular decision. It was ironic that, in this case, C.H. Robinson had used a broker that had an unconditional rating. Unconditional rating, by definition, means that they have safety deficiencies.
Yeah.
And
hours of service,
whatever,
crashes,
right.
Inspections.
And so you had, C.H. Robinson had used a broker that had an unconditional rating, but yet we're pushing this saying that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Even though they have an unconditional rating, they still have a license. And, if it's incumbent upon the federal government to, pull their license. Look, the federal government, they can't even inspect the new entrants, let alone the ones that are already in business. So, I think this does give now some framework for everybody to be able to say, now you get one of these cases, you're like, all right, broker, give me your policies and procedures for vetting carriers.
Yep. I mean, it's something that we've been doing in these cases, but it's a fight every single time. It's an uphill battle.
It's a huge fist fight, right? I mean, it's just an enormous fist fight, for them. And, we would just constantly get the pushback like, well, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. F quad A. We don't have to do that. All they have to do is have a license and, insurance. And, and doesn't matter, they literally, these brokers were pushing, it doesn't matter what their safety rating is. We are entitled to preemption. We could use anybody we want under any circumstances without any recourse. And that's terrifying. I mean, absolutely terrifying. The case that, Corey and I have, one of them, The driver was deported 13 times. 13 times. The company had zero. I mean, not a person in that company that spoke English, an English-speaking driver. Nobody had a license from a company in the United States. And that's just one, that's just one of many. I mean, it's nuts. We have another case where Canadian trucking company, and the driver wasn't even a Canadian resident. He had a visa from India.
Yeah.
And so again, no English, right? And
Both of those individuals killed someone.
yeah, both of those individuals killed. I mean, people died horrific deaths. One was a mother of a young woman, young children. The other had just literally retired a couple weeks. I mean, these are people that were doing nothing but minding their own business. And both of those cases, those deaths could have been prevented if the broker had done 5 minutes of due diligence.
Yeah. It hired terrible carriers in both of those cases. I mean, it's terrible. And now with this decision, we hope to be able to hold those brokers.
Yeah,
liable,
and I think there's also a movement now, a little bit of a movement to increase the insurance limits for, the tractor trailers. Maybe that'll insulate the brokers a little bit more. I couldn't agree more. And by the way, the insurance limits haven't been raised since 1970 something. The law specifically says that they will be readjusted for inflation. It has been stopped in the House for years and years and years and years and years. Why not just follow the law, right? If they follow the law, then it'll require all motor carriers to have insurance limits. If they readjust it for inflation right now, I think it's probably about $5 million.
There's what, $750,000?
$750,000 since like 1970.
And most of these are single limit policies, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, think about that. Say a tractor trailer kills a family of four. You're splitting
$750,000
between a family of four.
It's crazy, right? So hopefully that this will also push push that legislation forward finally. And again, when I say push that legislation forward, the legislation is already in place. They just won't, there has been a stop to actually readjust it, for inflation. And that's crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. Because the reality is, in these situations, like you have, yes, the brokers are bad actors. Yes, the shippers should be doing something more. But at the end of the day, you have people that, these trucking companies, they also have to be doing a better job of policing their drivers, making sure that they're doing things correctly. The only way that they're going to do that, obviously, I mean, what incentive did they have previously if you have a terrible trucking company, but you keep getting loads all the time?
They have no incentive, right?
No incentive.
It doesn't matter.
Right? So why would they, if they're running, their business, why would they say, oh yeah, let's invest in, electronic logs, or, let's invest in a really
dash cams.
Let's invest in, the forward collision avoidance mitigation. Yeah. Let's do all these things.
No reason to.
Yeah,
they're still going to get loads for the broker.
And they were still going to get loads from the broker. And then if they went out of business, they could be back in business the next day under a different name. So hopefully this will start to cut down on some of that. And hopefully we'll start to see a little bit more enforcement of the, obviously the English speaking rules.
Yeah. I mean, you're supposed to be able to read and write the English language.
Proficiency. You're supposed to have a proficiency in the English language. How, and one of the other things that we'll hopefully see is some of these schools that were just absolute, like, fraudulent types of schools.
There's one in Philadelphia.
There was one in Philadelphia. Hopefully it'll shut them down. Yeah. They should be shut down. Why? I mean, it's crazy that, like, these schools... we're offering tests in another language.
Yeah. I mean, how are you going to be able to read the road signs?
And we've had a number of those cases. I mean, when we show up, imagine this, like, crash happens, like we show up for a deposition and the other side's like, oh, he needs a translator. Needs a translator? I mean, if he needs a translator, that means he shouldn't have been on the road in the first place, right?
Correct.
And so that happens all the time, all the time.
And we're not trying to say immigrants or anyone shouldn't be driving trucks, but you have to just be proficient in the language.
You have to be proficient in the English language. You have to be able to read road signs. You have to be able to recognize road signs, especially like road closure signs. Because look, if there's construction or traffic and there's a blinking light and they don't know what that means.
I mean, think about a snow squall case. If they're right, I mean, if they're putting weather alerts on the screen, they can't read it, and they might be driving right into a snow squall.
Well,
I mean, especially in our area.
Yeah, I mean, not only can they not read it, right? So they can't read it, and the company's not doing anything to give alert them at all. So, you have some very small steps that if they're taken, hopefully will do a tremendous good for the safety of people out on the roadways.
This decision can do nothing but help increase the safety of
I
the
agree.
road.
I totally agree. And it also it does allow for there to be it's the word I'm looking for, not accountability, but
A recourse.
yeah, I mean there's now like there's uniformity, right? So now we all know, okay, whether you're in Pennsylvania or wherever it is, if those states allow for negligent selection of a motor carrier claims, now we have the ability. Yeah, everybody knows. Okay, these cases are you can go forward on these things, and we're talking about like these brokers are. Some of them are multi-billion-dollar companies.
They're huge companies.
I mean, enormous companies. And so now, like, you're not asking them to do anything other than be reasonable. Hire somebody that's reasonable. If you have children, like, you would never let somebody walk into your house to babysit your children if you didn't vet them, beforehand. And, that's your most precious asset. Well, the brokers, your precious asset that you need to protect against are these loads. So do some due diligence, right? Not just say, well, hey, I'm putting it out on a load board, and this company
Whoever selects it could take it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially what's happening right now.
If they have a
DOT number,
and insurance, that was it. And so now, there will be, some ramifications if they're going to do stuff like that. And hopefully they will start implementing some very, strict policies and procedures on it. It's not hard to vet a care. It's not. I mean, you can look at this information, you can look at the data, you could ask questions, and, will it potentially add a little bit of time in the selecting of a carrier to pick up a load? Of course it will. Of course it will. But when you weigh that against, all right, should we take 5 minutes or should we kill 500 people? I think everybody would vote for, well, let's take 5 extra minutes.
I think so too. You would hope so, at least.
You would hope so. I mean, it really is. It really is, kind of shocking. So, that's it. I mean, that's
really
it. I mean, that's the whole decision. I mean, everybody's been waiting for this.
So I was just gonna say we've been waiting a long time.
We've been waiting for this decision, and so everybody is, really excited about it.
Everyone involved, great work on it.
Oh my God. I mean, Rena Leeserman, Michael Leeserman, they're dear friends, and they did a fantastic job. The former Solicitor General who argued, the case, did an outstanding job, as well. I mean, really just well done, really, really well done by, everybody, that was involved in this. And the interesting thing is, you know, and I don't think it was lost on the court, is that, you know, the Solicitor General for the government, they had taken an exact opposite position
Yeah.
a number of years ago, and then, you know, now, you know, they kind of flip flopped on their, you know, on their position, and so I think that was, you know, that was probably not lost on the, you know, on the court, you know, as well. And you know, again, like Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote the you know, opinion of the court, very, very, very well written, very well reasoned. You
Doesn't
know,
leave any room for interpretation.
no, it was very clear,
Yeah.
and it actually, you know, it was surprising because it actually was written in very plain English.
Yeah, very, like it's not a long opinion.
No, very plain English.
Yeah.
Like this one is not even. I think she even said, like, this one's
It's
not
not
even
even
close.
close, yeah.
It's not even a close call. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what evolves from here. But again, you know, and the other thing is, like, this doesn't mean that now every case is a broker case. It just doesn't, right? I mean, you have some, you know, cases where the brokers have done what they're supposed to
Right.
do, and then, you know, you have a bad truck driver, or you have something that, you know, you have criminality through a
Yeah.
double brokering type of, you know, type of event that the broker doesn't even know about.
Correct.
I mean, there are those types of things. So the brokers can now insulate themselves from these lawsuits very easily by having those policies, having those procedures, and doing that, you know, doing that vetting, you know, of these carriers, so that, you know, when you do, if you do get sued, you could say, wait a second, I did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I looked at X, Y, and Z. We asked the questions, and unfortunately, a crash still happened. That doesn't mean that the broker did anything wrong. That actually means that the broker did everything
They did it
right,
right the way-
and
yeah.
they're going to be able to, you know, they're going to be able to defend that case and protect themselves.
Oh, couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Well,
So
all right. I think
that's it. I think
it.
that's a wrap for
Yeah.
today. You know, and we'll see. We'll see you next month. And we were going to have a guest this month. But because this decision came out, we
Yeah.
wanted to, you know, really be able to dig into it. But we are going to have a special, you know, special guest from the industry, you know, next month. And yeah, it's finally the weather's starting to break, so that means Corey will be golfing all the time, and I'm gonna have to try to, you know,
Yeah, we might do this every 2 months.
yeah,
now.
I'm gonna have to try to get him, you know, pull him out off the golf course in order to.
Listen, we
you
could
know,
do it. We could do it right from the golf course.
That's
live.
yeah. I'm sure everybody would want to see that. But no, really, thank you. I mean, this is so we had
Low
we had very
expectations.
little expectations when we
Yeah.
started doing this, other than, you know, to provide some information out there for mainly truck drivers, because we represent so many, and, you know, it's evolved from there. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yeah. Thanks. See you next time.